The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows over the desolate desert. The wind whispered softly through the sand, carrying with it the scent of dry earth. Nothing seemed unusual at first. No one was around to notice the small flickering light in the sky. But for those who were looking closely, the light grew brighter, larger, and more intense. It wasn't a star, nor was it an airplane. It was something much more mysterious. Suddenly, with a deafening crash, the light slammed into the desert floor, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. The ground trembled as if the earth itself was shaking in fear. The dust slowly settled, revealing something no one could have imagined: a ship, unlike any human craft. Its surface was dark and smooth, reflecting the fading sunlight. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its sides. The ship looked like it had come from another world. Inside the ship, something stirred. The hatch of the ship slowly creaked open, and a figure emerged. She was small, fragile-looking, but there was an unmistakable presence about her. Her skin shimmered like moonlight, her hair long and silver. But it was her eyes that caught everyone's attention. They were large, bright, and glowing with a soft golden light. She stood there for a moment, her eyes scanning the empty desert around her. She had arrived on Earth, but her mission was far from over. She stumbled as she took her first step, her legs unsteady from the crash landing. The girl looked around, disoriented and confused. The ship was in ruins, its hull cracked and burned, but she had made it. She was on Earth, a place she had only ever seen in dreams, a planet that had once seemed so distant.
Ow.
It was her only hope. She reached for a device on her wrist, but her fingers were trembling. She had to send a signal. Someone needed to know she was here. The world needed to be warned, but would they listen? She had traveled 369 light years to get here. She had risked everything. But now that she was here, would anyone believe her? Heart raced in her chest as she activated the device. A soft beep echoed in the silence of the desert, followed by a series of strange mechanical noises. She sent out a distress signal, hoping that someone, anyone, would pick it up. To warn them, the galaxy was at risk. But for now, all she could do was wait and hope, as the signal broadcasted into space. The girl collapsed to the ground, exhausted from the long journey. Her body was bruised and battered from the crash, and her energy was nearly gone. She was alone in a strange world with no one to turn to. She couldn't afford to. The fate of Earth depended on her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a distant sound. It was faint at first, like a whisper in the wind, but it was growing louder. Someone was coming. Her heart skipped a beat as she tried to push herself up, but her body refused to obey. She could barely lift her head as she watched a figure approach in the distance. A man. He looked normal enough, dressed in simple clothes, carrying a backpack. But the girl could tell there was something different about him. His eyes were wide, his movements cautious. He had seen the crash, had come to investigate. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak, barely a whisper. "Please?" she croaked, but no sound came out. She reached out a trembling hand, hoping to catch his attention. Her vision blurred and everything around her started to fade. The weight of her journey, the danger she had escaped, all of it was too much. The man stopped a few feet away from her, his gaze fixed on her glowing eyes. He took a step closer, his expression a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. He seemed frozen in place, unsure of what to do. "Are you real?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. The girl tried to speak again, but her throat was dry, her energy fading fast. She needed help. The world needed to know what was coming, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed someone who believed in her, someone who would listen. The man knelt down beside her, eyes still wide with disbelief. "You were not from here, are you?" Her gaze met his, and for the first time since she arrived, she felt a flicker of hope. He had asked the right question. Maybe, just maybe, he was the one she had been searching for. Maybe he was the only one who could help her save Earth. But would he believe her? Could he understand what was at stake? As the girl fought to stay conscious, she silently prayed that this man would be the one to hear her warning. She had traveled 369 light-years to get here. She couldn't afford to fail now. The man, still staring at her in awe, seemed to finally come to a decision. He reached out and touched her hand gently. "I believe you," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet determination. The girl's heart soared with relief. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. Jake couldn't believe his eyes. What he had stumbled upon in the desert was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He had seen strange things before: lights in the sky, unusual weather patterns, and rumors of government cover-ups, but this was different. Standing before him was not a person, not an animal, but something ... otherworldly. Her skin glowed faintly in the dimming light, and her eyes, those strange, radiant eyes, seemed to peer straight into his soul. She was not from Earth, that much was clear as Jake helped her sit up. Her frail body still shaking with exhaustion, he tried to process what he was seeing. The girl had not spoken much yet, only whispering broken phrases in a language he couldn't understand. But there was something in the way she moved, the way she looked at him, that told him this wasn't a hoax. She wasn't here by accident. "Need to warn you," she said suddenly, her voice weak but firm, her words laced with urgency. The moment she spoke, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't the words themselves, but the tone, the gravity in her voice, that made him feel the weight of her warning. "Warn me? About what?" Jake asked, his heart pounding faster. He had never believed in aliens, never thought such things were possible. But looking at her at the ship she had arrived in, he knew he couldn't deny what was in front of him. She wasn't from this planet. The girl took a deep breath and sat up straighter, her golden eyes locking with his. "I've traveled 369 light-years to find you, to warn you. Humanity is in danger." Jake's mind raced. Danger? From who? His voice trembled slightly. The last thing he wanted to believe was that some sort of alien war was coming to Earth. But deep down, a voice inside him told him that this wasn't just some strange dream. This was real. She hesitated, then pressed a small device on her wrist. It beeped quietly, and a holographic projection appeared before them, flickering in the air like a ghostly image. The projection showed a massive, dark ship unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was sleek, angular, and black, with terrifying, sharp edges. The image was surrounded by symbols and markings that seemed to pulse with energy. "This is the ship of my people," she explained. "But it's not what it seems. We were attacked, destroyed by a race that has been wiping out civilizations across the galaxy. They are coming here, to Earth." Jake could barely breathe as the magnitude of her words settled in. A part of him screamed in disbelief. This be happening? How could an alien invasion be real? But another part of him, the part that had always been curious about the unknown, knew that this was no accident. The girl with her glowing eyes and alien technology was not lying. She'd come here for a reason, and that reason was about to change everything. Double quotes, who? Who are they? Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. "They are the Charon," she said, her tone bitter, "a race of invaders. They destroy world civilizations by draining them of their resources. They have no mercy, no compassion. Once they take a planet, there is nothing left but ashes." Jake's mind reeled with her words. This was beyond anything he had ever expected. He had thought that if aliens were out there, they would be friendly, curious about humanity, perhaps. But these ... Kharan ... they were killers. They didn't care about peace or exploration. They cared only about destruction. "But why Earth?" Jake asked, his mind racing. "Why would they come here?" The girl's eyes grew darker, filled with a mix of sorrow and fear. "Because you are the last civilization they can conquer. Your resources are rich, your planet is thriving, and you are vulnerable. And because of your ignorance, no one believes in what is coming." She paused, as if trying to choose her next words carefully. "I tried to warn my people, but they didn't listen. They didn't believe me. I'm the last of my kind." Her voice cracked slightly as she continued, "I can't let the same thing happen to Earth. I can't let you all be destroyed." Jake's chest tightened as he tried to absorb the weight of her words. He had never thought of himself as important, just an ordinary guy with ordinary problems. But now, it felt like the entire fate of humanity rested on his shoulders. "How do we stop them?" he asked, the question slipping from his lips before he could stop it. The urgency in her voice had pulled him in, and now it was as if he couldn't back away. She had come to him for help. She had chosen him. She looked at him, her gaze steady. And for the first time since meeting her, Jake saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Together, you and I. We must find a way to make the world believe and to stop them before they destroy everything." Her words hung in the air, heavy with responsibility. Jake knew that he couldn't just walk away, couldn't ignore the truth anymore. If humanity was to survive, it had to be now. But could he convince anyone else? And even if he could, would it be enough to stop the Karen? The girl's eyes met his again, and without speaking, Jake knew what she was thinking. Time was running out. Jake sat in his small apartment, staring at the screen of his laptop, but his mind was far from the mundane task in front of him. All he could think about was the girl, the alien girl. Her face, those glowing eyes, the urgency in her voice, it haunted him even in the quietest moments. What she had said about the Karen race, the alien invaders, who would soon destroy Earth. It kept him awake at night. He had tried to tell others, of course. Called the authorities, sent emails to science experts, and even made posts online. But every response was the same: disbelief. They laughed it off as a hoax, a prank, or a fantasy. The world wasn't ready for something as unimaginable as alien invaders. Frankly, neither was Jake. How could anyone believe him? How could he, just one man, convince an entire planet of a threat they couldn't see? It was late when he finally picked up his phone and dialed her number. She had given him a communicator device, a small alien piece of tech that allowed them to stay in contact. He hadn't used it much, afraid of how much it revealed. The girl was still in hiding from the world's skepticism. She told him the less people knew, the better. "Jake," her voice crackled through the device. It was faint, but steady. "I think it's time. You have to warn them now. It's coming faster than we thought." The urgency in her tone sent a chill through Jake. It was more than just her words, it was the underlying panic that he heard. The sense of time running out. What's coming? What's changed? The Karen. They've made their first move. "The signs are everywhere," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "We've been watching. There's been a spike in unusual activity across the world's government projects, strange weather patterns, increased UFO sightings. It's happening now, Jake. The Karen are already here, hiding in plain sight. But they need humanity to stay divided, to stay unaware." Jake felt his stomach tighten. He was already doubting himself, wondering if he was losing his mind. But hearing her fear, the certainty in her voice, made him realize that this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about everyone. The world had to be warned, even if it meant risking everything. "I don't know how to make them listen," Jake said, his voice filled with frustration. "Everyone just thinks I'm crazy. They don't believe me." "I know," she replied softly. "That's why I need you to be smart. Can't be the one to speak for you. They won't believe me either. But you're human. You're their only chance." Jake felt a pang of guilt. Why had he been so skeptical? Why had he wasted time on doubts when people's lives were at stake? He had to act, not for himself, but for everyone. "I'm going to the news," Jake said, suddenly filled with determination. "If I can get the media to listen, maybe, just maybe, the world will see what's really happening. If they hear it from me, ... maybe they'll take it seriously." The girl on the other end of the line paused. Jake could feel her hesitation. "Be careful. They won't take kindly to what you have to say. Some will try to silence you. The Karen have eyes everywhere. But we can't just wait." Jake's voice was louder now. "You've told me enough. The world needs to know, no matter the cost." She sighed softly, a sound filled with regret. "I'll help you, Jake. But once you make this known, there's no turning back. The Karen are already tracking your movements. They'll know you've spoken out." "I don't care," Jake replied, his jaw set with resolve. "I've seen enough. I've heard enough. I'll do whatever it takes." After a long silence, the girl finally spoke, her voice steady, but full of gravity. Then we begin. You have one chance to make them believe you. Make it count. Jake hung up the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no plan, no idea what would happen next. But he couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. It was time to act. He gathered his things, grabbed his coat, and walked out of his apartment. He wasn't sure what he was going to do, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't do this alone. The girl's warning was his burden now, and if no one else would listen, he would have to make them. The world had to know the truth. The day Jake decided to go public with the alien warning, he didn't expect much. The girl had told him that people would mock him, label him insane, and dismiss his claims as the ramblings of a delusional mind. But he hadn't expected the absolute silence that followed. Not from the media, not from the public, certainly not from the government. Jake had made his announcement early in the morning, live streaming a video to millions explaining everything the girl had told him. He showed the holographic images, shared her warnings, and even included recordings of their conversations. He laid everything on the line. He sat back, watching as the views climbed. At first, the comments were a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. Some were mocking, others intrigued. But the moment he posted the link to major news outlets, the silence fell. No phone calls, no interviews, no reactions from the big news stations. It was like the world had forgotten the broadcast existed. "Why is no one responding?" muttered, staring at his screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to do more, to push harder. But deep down, he knew what was happening. The government had seen it. They always did. Every move Jake made was being watched. He had hoped that, maybe, just maybe, one of the larger news organizations would pick it up and run with it. But the silence was deafening. No calls, no updates, no breaking news reports. Nothing. It was as if the world had decided to ignore the truth that was staring them in the face. Jake sat back in his chair, frustration building like a storm inside him. He'd been so sure that the truth would get through, people would listen. They would see that the alien girl had come to warn them, not harm them. They would realize that the Karen were already infiltrating Earth, that the signs of the impending disaster were already visible. How could anyone ignore this? But the truth was too terrifying. The alien girl's warnings weren't just a call for help. They were a declaration of a war the world wasn't prepared to fight. People were too comfortable in their ignorance, too afraid to face what was really out there. Jake grabbed his phone and dialed the alien girl's number. His hands were shaking. He needed answers. He needed to know what to do next. "It's happening," he said the moment she picked up. "Shh. One is listening. The media is ignoring us. The government is pretending like nothing's happening. What do we do now?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before her voice came through, quiet but resolute. "This was always going to be difficult, Jake. The Karen are experts at keeping the truth hidden. Their technology, their influence. They've infiltrated the highest levels of power. They are controlling the narrative. But we can't just sit here. The whole world needs to know what's coming." Jake's voice was rising now. He was past the point of uncertainty. He was past the point of worrying about how ridiculous it sounded. The world had to know, or it was doomed. "I know," she said, softly, "and I've been thinking of another way. A way that doesn't rely on the media. We'll come for you, Jake. You must be careful." Jake's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Her voice took on a serious tone. "There's a backup plan. Few individuals on Earth have been monitoring the Karen, trying to resist their influence. I can help you reach them. They may not have the power to stop the invasion, but they can be a force for change. We need to make them listen. We need to create a movement. It's the only chance we have." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "You're telling me there are other people who know about this? Who believe us?" "Yes," she said, the faintest hint of hope in her voice. "But they are scattered, hidden, afraid. They won't come out in the open unless they know they can trust you." Jake felt a new sense of urgency. There was a hidden resistance out there, people who knew the truth, and were just as afraid to expose it as he was. But if he could find them, if they could join forces, maybe they could take the fight to the Karen. Maybe they could stop the invasion before it was too late. "I'm in," Jake said firmly. "Tell me what to do next. I'll guide you. But you must be prepared. The Karen are watching you. Every step you take, they'll know. You'll be a target from now on." Jake didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." He knew this wasn't just a matter of telling the truth anymore. It was about gathering the pieces of a war that had already begun. The world may have ignored him, but he wouldn't stop. He couldn't. Humanity had no idea what was coming, and it was up to him to make them understand. The world had been silent, but that silence was about to break. The world had been quiet for weeks. Signs were everywhere, but no one had connected the dots. Unexplained power outages in major cities, strange electromagnetic disruptions, satellite malfunctions, small, seemingly unimportant events, but Jake knew better now. He had seen enough, heard enough. The Quran were here. They were preparing for something big. Jake paced back and forth in his cramped apartment, his mind a whirlwind of questions. He couldn't sit idly by anymore. He had tried everything getting the truth out, warning people, but now, it was no longer about being believed. It was about survival. The girl had told him the invasion had already started, but the true scale of it was far worse than he could have imagined. He was jolted from his thoughts by a sudden, piercing sound the communicator she had given him. The device buzzed urgently, flashing a warning that only he could understand. The alien girl's face appeared on the small screen, her expression grim. "Jake," she said, her voice low, almost haunted. "It's begun." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean it's begun? There's a massive fleet coming. It's already in Earth's orbit, hiding behind the moon. They've been there for days, waiting for the right moment to strike. But they don't need to land. They've already infiltrated your systems. The Charon aren't just coming as invaders. They're already part of your world. They've been controlling governments, corporations, and military forces for decades." The weight of her words hit Jake like a freight train. He sank into a chair, unable to process the enormity of what she was saying. "So they've already what, taken over?" "Not fully," she said, "but they've been pulling strings from the shadows. They control critical infrastructures, communication channels, and military assets. The Karen are masters of subterfuge, and they've been planting their agents. On Earth for years, they've already identified the key leaders, the ones who will help them take full control. The world is on the brink of being consumed without even realizing it." Jake's mind raced. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could they have been so blind? How could the whole planet be unaware of something so huge? The Karen weren't just alien invaders. They were spies, manipulators, infiltrators. Earth wasn't just about to face an attack. It was already under siege. "What do we do?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. His stomach churned with a new kind of fear, the kind that didn't come from the unknown, but from the realization that the enemy was already inside. "First, we need to expose them," she replied firmly. "There's a risk. They will come after you the moment you make your move. Karen will stop at nothing to keep their existence a secret, but there's a way. I've found a hidden channel, a backdoor into their network. It's the only way we can prove to humanity that the Karen are here and that they've been controlling your planet." Jake's pulse quickened. "A backdoor? How do we access it?" The alien girl's eyes flashed with an eerie intensity. "We need to break into the Karen's communication hub. It's heavily guarded, but I've mapped out a way to get inside. It's the moment we do, we can broadcast their presence to the world. Every government, every military base, every key player will be forced to acknowledge them. It's the only way we can stop them from completing their takeover." Jake swallowed hard, the weight of what she was asking sinking in. A direct assault on the Karen's communication hub? It sounded insane, impossible. But then again, this entire situation was insane. He didn't have a choice anymore. He couldn't wait for someone else to act. The world needed to know what was happening, and it needed to happen now. "Okay?" Jake said, standing up with renewed determination. "Let's do it. We'll find the way in. We'll expose them." The alien girl nodded. "But be prepared. Once you make your move, everything changes. They'll retaliate. They won't just try to stop us. They'll try to erase us." As the connection flickered and the girl's image disappeared, Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. The plan was clear now. There was no turning back. The world was about to find out the truth, but at what cost?
Hey,
Jake grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. He wasn't sure how he was going to get to the car and hub, or what kind of resistance he'd face. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to wait for someone else to save humanity. It had to be him. The alien forces were already moving. It was time to fight back. The world had been quiet for weeks. The signs were everywhere, but no one had connected the dots. Unexplained power outages in major cities, strange electromagnetic disruptions, satellite malfunctions, small, seemingly unimportant events. But Jake knew better now. He had seen enough, heard enough. The Quran were here, and they were preparing for something big. Jake paced back and forth in his cramped apartment, his mind a whirlwind of questions. He couldn't sit idly by anymore. He had tried everything, getting the truth out, warning people, but now it was no longer about being believed. It was about survival. The girl had told him the invasion had already started. But the true scale of it was far worse than he could have imagined. He was jolted from his thoughts by a sudden, piercing sound the communicator she had given him. The device buzzed urgently, flashing a warning that only he could understand. The alien girl's face appeared on the small screen, her expression grim. "Jake," she said, her voice low, almost haunted. "It's begun." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, it's begun? There's a massive fleet coming. It's already in Earth's orbit, hiding behind the moon. They've been there for days, waiting for the right moment to strike. But they don't need to land. They've already infiltrated your systems. The Karen aren't just coming as invaders. They're already part of your world. They've been controlling governments, corporations, and military forces for decades." The weight of her words hit Jake like a freight train. He sank into a chair, unable to process the enormity of what she was saying. "So they've already what, taken over?" "Not fully," she said, "but they've been pulling strings from the shadows. They control critical infrastructures, communication channels, and military assets. The Karan are masters of subterfuge, and they've been planting their agents on Earth for years. They've already identified the key leaders, the ones who will help them take full control. The world is on the brink of being consumed without even realizing it." Jake's mind raced. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could they have been so blind? How could the whole planet be unaware of something so huge? The Karen weren't just alien invaders. They were spies, manipulators, infiltrators. Earth wasn't just about to face an attack. It was already under siege. "What do we do?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. His stomach churned with a new kind of fear, the kind that didn't come from the unknown, but from the realization that the enemy was already inside. "First, we need to expose them," she replied firmly. "There's a risk. It will come after you the moment you make your move. The Quran will stop at nothing to keep their existence a secret, but there's a way. I've found a hidden channel, a back door into their network. It's the only way we can prove to humanity that the Karen are here and that they've been controlling your planet." Jake's pulse quickened. "A back door? How do we access it?" The alien girl's eyes flashed with an eerie intensity. "We need to break into the Karen's communication hub. It's heavily guarded, but I've mapped out a way to get inside. The moment we do, we can broadcast their presence to the world. Every government, every military base, every key player will be forced to acknowledge them. It's the only way we can stop them from completing their takeover." Jake swallowed hard, the weight of what she was asking sinking in. A direct assault on the Karen's communication hub? It sounded insane, impossible. But then again, this entire situation was insane. He didn't have a choice anymore. He couldn't wait for someone else to act. The world needed to know what was happening, and it needed to happen now. "Okay?" Jake said, standing up with renewed determination. "Let's do it. We'll find the way in. We'll expose them." The alien girl nodded. "But be prepared. Once you make your move, everything changes. They'll retaliate. They won't just try to stop us. They'll try to erase us." As the connection flickered and the girl's image disappeared, Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. The plan was clear now. There was no turning back. The world was about to find out the truth, but at what cost? Jake grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Wasn't sure how he was going to get to the Karen hub, or what kind of resistance he'd face. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to wait for someone else to save humanity. It had to be him. The alien forces were already moving. It was time to fight back. The world was in chaos. Jake stood in the midst of a storm, both literal and metaphorical. The broadcast had gone out, and the truth had finally been revealed. The Karen were no longer a whisper in the shadows. They were now a global threat, their presence known to every government, every citizen, and every military force. The streets were filled with panic, confusion, and fear, but also a strange sense of urgency. People were waking up to the fact that Earth was no longer the peaceful planet it had once been. But while the world struggled to process the revelation, Jake knew there was no time to waste. The Karen weren't going to simply let this go. They had been working in the dark for too long, infiltrating governments and systems to allow humanity to unite against them. The real battle was only beginning. Jake's communicator buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, and the familiar face of the alien girl appeared on the screen. She looked different now, not just exhausted, but broken. Her once hopeful eyes now carried the weight of everything they were about to face. She had warned him this would happen. But even in her voice there was no trace of fear. "They've activated the final phase," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "They are sending their full forces to Earth. Everything we've done to expose them, it's only made them more desperate. The Karen aren't just a threat anymore. They're a force of annihilation." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. "So what now? What do we do?" "The time has come for us to make a choice," she replied quietly, as though the weight of her words carried the burden of their entire future. "The Karen cannot be defeated by force alone. Their control over Earth is too deep. The only way to stop them is to disrupt their central command. But it's a suicide mission." Jake's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She met his gaze through the screen, her eyes locking with his, as if trying to communicate something beyond words. "I've found a way into their command center. If I can breach it, I can disable their systems and sever their hold on Earth. But it requires one of us to stay behind. One of us has to stay within their network and initiate the shutdown. I'll guide you through the final steps, but once the command center goes dark, the Karen will retaliate. There's no coming back." Jake's blood ran cold. He knew what she was saying. "You want me to stay behind? ... She nodded, her face softening. "I can't ask you to make that choice. But if we don't do this, if we don't stop them now, everything you fought for, everything we fought for will be destroyed. The Karen will finish what they started. Earth will never be free again." Jake looked around, his mind racing. The city was on the brink of collapse, and the Karen's ships loomed in the sky, ready to strike at any moment. The resistance was rallying, but they didn't have the firepower to fight a full-scale invasion. The alien girl was right. There was only one way to stop it. He closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing on him like a crushing wave. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone, the millions of people he had spent his entire life trying to protect. The choice was clear. "All right," Jake said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "I'll do it. I'll stay, but you have to promise me something." The alien girl's eyes searched his face. "Anything. You make sure they know. Make sure they know we fought back. That we didn't just let them take over without a fight." Her expression softened, a faint but proud smile flickering on her lips. "I will, Jake. I promise." Jake swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he prepared to make the final push. The world had been given a chance to survive. But he knew that sacrifice was the price of freedom. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for the lives of billions. "Get to the command center. I'll follow you in," he said. His voice filled with quiet determination. As the alien girl's image faded from the screen, Jake stood alone in the heart of the chaos. The world was on the brink, and he was about to become the last line of defense. He didn't know if he would survive this, if anyone would. But he knew one thing for sure. Earth was worth fighting for. And if this was the only way to stop the Karen, then it was a price he was willing to pay. with one last look at the city skyline. Jake turned and walked toward the darkened horizon, ready to face whatever came next. The final battle wasn't about victory. It was about making sure that Charon knew that humanity wasn't going down without a fight.